Keep going.
I know. Bring us to the moment that we're at right now. What's the play? What's the significance?
Well, let's use Halloween. Okay, so let's come back to Halloween.
Yep.
They're big into astrology, numerology, symbology. They have essentially 8 big festivals out of the year. Halloween is their, there's a warlock side, there's a witch side. They're all into this mirroring thing. But Halloween, the harvest time, is very important. Even the date, the 31st. What's the 31st? Well, it's a reverse 13. They're into every number has some kind of a meaning. So, the 30th is a 13. The 31st is a 113. They don't use zeros. Zeros don't count in their numerology, the gematria of things. It doesn't have a value, so you have a 9 number system, a base 9, suppose a base 10. And so Halloween is this harvest season for them. It's their most evil day of the year in certain aspects of the religion. Each season is more evil for a different reason. And so you have different sects within the cult, if you will. It'd be like Catholics have one thing and the Lutherans have another, and the Jews have another. So you have different sects within this occult realm that for example, the summer, from the spring equinox to the fall equinox, that's when the witches have more power. And, it's all about the Eve side, the florid growth and everything else. The warlocks are more powerful during the winter side, from the fall equinox to the spring equinox in the darker days. So within their cult, their religion, there's these dualities, these variations. So here we arrive at Halloween, and this is a harvest period. One of the things about Halloween and the way it was celebrated, for example, by the Druids over in England, and our friend in Wales and others over there are going to know what I'm talking about even more intently, was that they would prepare sacrifices for these black Sabbaths, if you will, for their high holy days. And those sacrifices were to their god, Satan, Lucifer, the devil. So just like from, say, the Jewish period in the Old Testament, where there was sacrifices that were symbolic of what God was going to bring with the Christ to reconcile man with him through this blood sacrifice that was, from a Christian standpoint, Christ on the cross. They have to reconcile themselves with their creator, the devil, Lucifer, their father, and they make sacrifices also, and their sacrifices are an evil sacrifice. So they offer, if they want a good harvest, if they want a good planting in the next spring, they make sacrifices of blood sacrifices, and they would offer their children up, in the spring especially, but in the fall also. And these blood sacrifices are quite literally people, humans. And so, for example, let me, what's the origins of the pumpkin that everybody's carving up and having fun with and everything else? Part of the reason that's hard for me to get into the whole Halloween thing, and I have friends that, they say they're going to capture Halloween and they want to do it for good and they want to show all sorts of things, and they want the kids not to be out trick-or-treating, but they want to do their Halloween thing. I have a hard time doing anything Halloween to honor anything, because for me, there's no good aspect. So, for example, the pumpkin. Look, I can enjoy art and fun as well as anybody. It's fun to carve it up and cut it out and make funny faces and things like that. But what's the origin of the Halloween pumpkin? They were actually other vegetables. The pumpkin just happens to be better in our Western culture. There were turnips and like that, but they would carve them out, hollow them out. And what was done in the Druidic period was that they would, the Druids had to have sacrifices. And so they would go out and they would go through the community. And what was done in the early Druid days, in the dark centuries that we don't have great written history on, but it is written, the Romans talked about it in some of the writings when they came up to England and some of the dark practices. They would come out 3 days before the Halloween festival. And throughout the land, you could not have a fire. You couldn't even have a smoldering ember in your fireplace. And if you did, then you would be severely tortured or taken and killed. That was the threat by the Druids, because the only ones that could have fire were the priests. And so you had to extinguish. No ember, no smoldering ember could be left anywhere but in the priests' sacrificial bonfires on top of the hills around the communities. The highest place in an area was where the sacrifices would occur. And so you didn't have heat for your home. You didn't have heat to cook with. And of course, you have to think, this is before we had electricity and solar and whatever else we might have. This is in an area that's dank and damp and cold. And so you're in the fall season. And so the priests would set up fires on the hills, the highest area that could be seen in an area, highest location could be seen in an area. And they'd have these huge bonfires. Everybody would extinguish their fires. Then the priests would go out and they would demand a sacrifice from the peasants, the property owners, the people. And the sacrifice would be goods. It'd be food from their garden. It would be meat that they had slaughtered, animals that they were going to do. And they had to make a sacrifice. And periodically, every home was required to give a human sacrifice from time to time. And if it was a good one, that was so that you would have a good harvest. Your home would do well, because they needed human sacrifices.
They say the greatest weapon is deception.
You have to understand,
as the deceiver.
It's very hard for people to grasp this. It's very, the devil.
That's the lesson we have to learn.
But the other thing is this:
know your enemy.
If somebody has grown up, has skills, is productive, they become an essential part of a home farm survival operation. The younger a child is, the more replaceable it is. And so that's why we see when we go to war in all these places around the world, it's children that are carrying the guns. It's children that go walk into the minefield to find the mine. And if they survive, it's an act of God. And if they don't, they're replaceable much more quickly. And so the older people, the men, the women, the ones that have reached childbearing age, the ones that are intelligent enough to actually conduct a battle or to do harvest or to do planting, etc., they become more important. So the children carry the guns, the children do the war. That's what's so horrid. You look at, I think of Vietnam and it's young kids. I think of World War II, it's young kids, 18, 19. I had a friend that passed away here a couple of years ago, and he lied about his age. He's a big kid. And he goes to war and he's 16 years old. Nobody ever caught it. I have another one that's alive right now that's got issues, and his mom signed a waiver for him. And he went in at 16 years old because they couldn't afford to feed him, and that's what he did. And he fought over in Japan. So, in the islands going to Japan. That's more common than people realize. And so the kids do the war. In this case, the Druids would go through the area, there's these high priests, these satanic priests, who are supposed to be so wise and knowledgeable and everything else. You know, get over the crap, okay? These were, this was a satanic cabal that was running a very wicked operation. And, oh, they're so wise and knowledgeable and good. No, they weren't. Okay? They may have known the scriptures. You know what? The devil himself knows the scriptures.
Fun times,
by
man.
dot, line by line, comma by comma. What did the devil tempt Christ with when Christ was fasting? He quoted scripture and tempted Christ using scripture. It was only that Christ knew the scripture as well and better, and then quoted scripture back to the devil to overcome it and restate it correctly. So the devil knows scripture. You think, oh, you know, just because somebody quotes scripture doesn't mean that they're the good guy, okay? You know, and so we come back to, yes, and you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, etc. So now you come back, right? So then you come back to the Druids, and what they would do is they would require a sacrifice, and the better the sacrifice, the better supposedly you were going to do in the ensuing period of time. Now, it had to be the senior person in the house that chose that person or sacrifice that was given. And so when the Druids showed up, if you provided a sacrifice that was suitable, that they accepted, then they would place a turnip or pumpkin type thing there on your porch, and it was lit. And what allowed it to stay lit was that before they started, they would have a human sacrifice, and they were dragging it. And so in Masonic symbology, you see a body where one leg is up and the other leg is straight. They would tie a rope to the one leg and drag it, and the other leg would just get folded up. Then they would kill that person at some point in this thing, dragging it through a community, and they would take fat from the body, and they would place a wick in it and light it inside of that turnip. If you had provided what they wanted, that was a suitable sacrifice, then they would put that pumpkin, that turnip with the lit candle inside, that had a face carved in it, and it told other Druid bodies, raiding bodies behind them, that you had done what you were supposed to do and to leave this house alone. They've provided. If you didn't trick or treat, if you gave them their treat, they were fine. If you didn't, then you got the trick, and they would smear blood on the house from that body. And then the warring parties coming behind them would know that you were marked, and they would raid and take whatever they wanted anyway. So, and the threat was to not make the choice would be far worse than to make the choice. And often it was young children that were the sacrifice, because they were, from a pure logistics level, they were the most readily replaceable, and they were also the easiest to manage. So then you take and you go forward with that. I mean, this is the horrible story of the pumpkin that nobody wants to talk about. It's the elephant in the room, okay? Then they would take those sacrifices to the hillside where the bonfire was, and the people were expected to come there and participate, observe as the sacrifices occurred. Of course, it's warm at the fire, and these huge bonfires that could be seen from everywhere around. And it was the only light. If you had any smoldering ember somewhere, and you were keeping that for any reason, they saw the smoke, they saw whatever, they found it, you were history, you were toast, you were a sacrifice. So you knew not to do that. Then they would do this 3 days in advance. And what would they do? If they had a human sacrifice or an animal sacrifice, they would torment to prepare the human or the animal for sacrifice. They would sacrifice another human in front of another human. They would keep them there on that hillside in front of the fire. They were tortured and tormented. Why was that? Because in the torture, in the torment, the person or the animal would be adrenalized. And so the adrenaline is coursing through the veins, and they would do it over and over on a type of a schedule, because the body can only put so much adrenaline out, and then it's completely exhausted. And then you do it again. And over a course of days, the body of the person that survives longer would be more and more saturated with adrenaline. And so you're there in this place of torment in the darkness, and the whole community is there, and they can't stop it. If they try to stop it, they end up being the sacrifice themselves. And in order, almost as a protective feature, a way of dealing with it, people have to harden, to stiffen to what's happening. It's such a horror. I mean, you really can't even begin to fully conceptualize it. So the community is in this horrified state, and yet they're present. Those that do choose to be present have to harden so much. And what are they doing? They're kissing up to the high priests, this evil cabal, to show that they're in agreement. Why would they also do it? Because they don't want to be the victim the next time. They don't want to be the one. They have to kiss up to them. The high priests don't seem to be having their family members being sacrificed in this way necessarily. If they did do one, it's symbolic, and they'll pick one to do it just because they don't go along with things just right. So then, at the final day, the highest holy day, at that midnight black mass, they would then do their chief sacrifices. And of course, think of it from a satanic perspective, from a pure evil perspective. And so you're there in this place of torment in the darkness, and the whole community is there, and they can't stop it. If they try to stop it, they end up being the sacrifice themselves. And in order, almost as a protective feature, a way of dealing with it, people have to harden, to stiffen to what's happening. It's such a horror. I mean, you really can't even begin to fully conceptualize it. So the community is in this horrified state, and yet they're present. Those that do choose to be present have to harden so much. And what are they doing? They're kissing up to the high priests, this evil cabal, to show that they're in agreement. Why would they also do it? Because they don't want to be the victim the next time. They don't want to be the one. They have to kiss up to them. The high priests don't seem to be having their family members being sacrificed in this way necessarily. If they did do one, it's symbolic, and they'll pick one to do it just because they don't go along with things just right. So then, at the final day, the highest holy day, at that midnight black mass, they would then do their chief sacrifices. And of course, think of it from a satanic perspective, from a pure evil perspective. If the goal is going back to the garden, that if only you could get to Adam after you killed Cain, if only you could stop the reproduction of anything that isn't a hybrid, any one that isn't a hybrid, a Cain Eve mix that has that commingled DNA. If you can destroy the last member of the Adamic family that's a purebred, then you've won. And on the way, you just have to get everyone that you possibly can. So from a satanic perspective, these pure children, these children that aren't commingled blood, not the Cain line, the king line, the royal line, they're the ones that are most favored. They're the ones, the pure, the hair, the everything else that tells you what line they're from. And so then they're purely adrenalized. If you compare, and this is a horrible thing to say, and I apologize to your audience, we're having a serious adult conversation here, so I apologize, and if you're weak-kneed, please leave.
Well, I would just throw out too that this is relevant because that line, just a little bit that you explained there, of eliminating everybody but the Cain line, the king line, the kinship line, that's what people don't understand about politics, about finances, about the religion, and it's more so in religion, but it's more in the public sphere, that they like to say there's a separation between church and state, but in their own teachings, it's all about the religious beliefs, and it's all very, very tribal, and it's very historic. And whether you agree with it, you have to understand that that's the chief motivating factor that gives them, through their perspective, their lens, we are the chosen ones. We are the right to rule. We do need to accomplish this control narrative or death cult. It's fine when it's everybody else but them, to get to their promised land. And we're in this period right now, and you've said it, other people do say it, where we're going to have to stand and sort of choose a side here, and stand for good, stand for righteousness, stand for humanity, and stand for God. So that's why it's a lot to undertake, and we want to present this as our gift to people today in the time that we're in, because we have to have that foundation to make some of the decisions that we're going to be making very soonly, or very soon.
Yes. Well, and so if you got weak knees, just go away, come back in 10, 15 minutes. So here's the deal. In the Old Testament, when the priests were making sacrifices, animal sacrifices to God, they also ate the meat from those sacrifices. And what meat they didn't eat, they had to burn it up, burn the bones up, etc. It was consumed in that way. It was part of the whole thing. It's got certain religious significance overtones that symbolically mean certain things, but they would partake of the animal sacrifices, and that was their, part of their support. In these Druidic ceremonies, in these Baal and Moloch worshiping ceremonies that go back, one thing, the hills around Israel, in the Old Testament, it talks about that this component of the nation of Israel that was not doing the will of God, these children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that became the nation of Israel, that, people think, oh, it's so holy and it's so nice, and the Old Testament, it's so beautiful. The reality is it was one of the most wicked places, one of the most evil nations on earth at various times. Why? God himself did things to the nation of Israel because they left his way. And what were they doing? They were offering their own children to Moloch and Baal. The practices that were occurring in Canaan land that made God send the children of Israel like an army to destroy the Canaanites because their evil was a stench to God, because they were so wicked and horrible that they had to be destroyed. And the nation of Israel came in to do God's will, to take out these giants. What was their practice? They were doing human sacrifice. That's where the Moloch and Baal worship was at on the planet. But when the nation of Israel took the land and lived there, they didn't get rid of all of these evil people. And then they took on some of the practices of these evil people, and they continued them with these sacrifice sites dedicated to Moloch and Baal. And what did Moloch and Baal require? Human sacrifices, child sacrifices. And so they would offer these sacrifices at the fires on top of the hills. That's what was going on during that time. And God destroyed the nation, sent them into exile because they were doing this evil worship. And by the way, in Kings, it talks about Asa kicked his own mom out of the royal household when he became king, because his mom was doing worship and had all of this symbology from the pole god inside the royal court. And the priests were worshiping the pole god. What's the pole god? The monolith, the penis, the same thing we have today. Go look at it. They had the same religion that we're seeing as the center of the capital of our country. We are a captured operation. All over the world, we see this over and over. So what was it that these Moloch, Baal-worshiping people were doing when they sacrificed the children? They were making them to pass through the fire. Just like the high priests in this symbolic work that was done with animal sacrifices in the Holy of Holies and the Temple of God, what were these satanic priests doing after they had these child sacrifices? They were eating the human flesh of the people that had been killed, that were adrenalized before they were killed. And they were eating that human flesh, that adrenalized flesh, because they got a high from it. And they were doing in Satan's own way, in the devil's own way, mimicking God's thing. And again, this is part of they win by defeating Adam. This is their cross to them. It's the phallic symbol at the center of Washington, D.C. is important to these Satanists, to this cabal, as the cross is to Christians, because their salvation comes through this sex act with Eve. This sex act that's memorialized with Isis and her dead son and this stone. Their salvation at this moment in history is about the hybridization of man and machine. And the machine is being made to mimic the coded DNA signal imprint from this prior time period to now, to channel these demonic influences. And if the machine can mimic that, can channel that effectively enough, they can reanimate in this dimension and live again and live eternally. And that's the whole point. If they can make a complex, intricate enough machine, the devil himself cannot be killed, destroyed, cut off from this world by God. And if he can't achieve that level of hybridization, he could end up in hell, never able to reanimate outside of his hell into this physical existence. And that's the challenge. That's the moment. And so this technology, and by the way, at the Tower of Babel, what happened at the Tower of Babel? It said that they were building a tower to the heavens, that if God came and looked at it, is the way the story is told, and he saw what they were doing, and he said, if they're left to their own ways, that nothing would be impossible to them. And they were building a tower to heaven. So a type of, if you will, a space program. Think of how long it's taken us to go from buggies and buggy whips to aircraft and spacecraft. Arguably, on the technological side, the reality is the build out's about 300 years. If you look at the way things have progressed, all the little pieces that need to be built one on top of the other. So let's say 300 years. Imagine if the Tower of Babel, everybody's talking the same way there and they continue on. What if it's 300? What if it's 500? What if it's 1,000? What is technology going to look like 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, out in the future right now? Just from where we are right now, and then go back to the Tower of Babel, 3,000 years ago to today, what would humanity look like if they'd been able to industrialize? So how did God stop that? How did he thwart that? What God did is, it says he confused their languages between them, so they couldn't communicate. He made it so that one person couldn't talk to the other, coordinate their ideas, their thoughts. Just like you and I right now, we're getting to communicate because we speak the same language. I would argue that for a lot of listeners, some of what we're saying may sound like an entirely different language. You have to learn a lot of the terms. Well, seriously,
Sure.
You have to learn a lot of the terms. You have to get some of these concepts. So I'm trying to educate them as to how they arrive at some of these ideas and thoughts. So in the way that I would say it, you could say we're having a science class. I'd say we're having church. In reality, are the two completely different, or is it just a terminology that we have to kind of think things through? We're having a very different conversation. So now at the Tower of Babel, God confused the languages so they couldn't communicate their ideas, and they dispersed because they couldn't get along together. The families went all different directions. They spread out across the world. In our generation, what has happened to reverse that act of God that makes our time period like the time period of the Tower of Babel? What has happened in the world that is so critical, so important in this moment of time, this satanic moment that gives them this window? And even these Kabbalists, these royal bloodlines, these industrialists, these politicians, what is it that's so critical right now? Because the Tower of Babel, what happened at the Tower of Babel has been reversed. It's been, that unwinding has been brought back together. What's the piece of equipment that has defeated the confusion of different languages for man? It's the computer.
Communications, internet.
Nope, it's not. It's the computer specifically.
Computer. Okay.
Because we now have a common language of ones and zeros.
Well, I was saying that because at least we have back in Tower of Babel to stop people from communicating with a common language. At least we're able to communicate. But you're right. That's the universal language.
Yes, it's the universal language. So we have a universal language translator, and it's the computer. And now we can communicate ideas, thoughts, information in an intricate way and make it make sense to the other person with this device. And of course, what is the device? It's, again, this silicon-based, silica-based tool that, if it can be made precisely and intricately enough, it can essentially begin to mimic DNA precisely, just like we record very intricate programs onto a computer disk or hard drive or encoded into software, etc. Essentially, that's what you're doing. The DNA is just a software program. If you can record something that existed before and get that close enough, you can reanimate it. So here we have these royal bloodlines, these Cain lines, these cannibals. Think about it. Why they're eating human flesh? They're cannibals, to eat the flesh. And they're laughing at us because we're not supposed to get the connection. And it's these high priests doing it. And this is their high holy season right now. And they're mimicking that moment. They're worshiping their god. What happened you remember we had this arch of Baal that was brought all around the country here. They wanted to do it back when Hillary was running for office, and it was supposed to be the symbolic thing at New York. And they were going to have their services at it, and they were going to get power over the country, and they were going to get it from channeling these evil spirits, these entities, to control the outcome of the election, the psychosis of the people or psyche of the people. And so they were going to have this Arch of Baal. And what was the Arch of Baal? It was a monument at the base of Mount Hermon that in this Syrian war, the rebels, ISIS, supposedly destroyed this Arch of Baal, but they only did it after it was very intricately, precisely imaged with very high resolution cameras so that it could then be replicated in foam. So they take all the images, then they make an exact duplicate out of foam. Then the original is destroyed. So now what happens is the spirits that are attached to that location are able to travel and be channeled at this other location where that image is reconstructed, put up. And so now it becomes a gateway. We talk about portals. We talk about gateways. This is a gateway, okay, to other dimensions is the way that people would look at that. So what do you have in New York? There in the park, you have an arch. Arches are always symbolic of gates. And so you had Elizabeth Warren, when she came out and announced she was going to run for president. Where did she make her announcement? In New York. And where was she? Between the other world and our physical world, standing in the arch, in the gateway between worlds, channeling demon energy, if you will, but otherworldly energy in the way that some people would say, to give her force and power and everything else. What do you have in Washington, D.C.? You look around, all the buildings have huge arches all over the place. The buildings have arches everywhere. They're channeling otherworldly entities and spirits into this world because those are gateways for this demonic energy, this otherworldly energy to get into the world. So now we come to this Halloween season and we see all of these horrors. What has been happening within the world's consciousness, the people, the sentinels who are helping us to break out of this mental maze, this programming, this propaganda, this MK Ultra that's been done to us at a societal level, this trauma-based programming. We've reached an age of maturity, and some of us, enough of us, like your audience, are just conscious enough, and we're looking around and going, oh my gosh, where am I? What's going on around me? What am I part of? And they're saying, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't be part of it. I can't allow this to happen. Suddenly they're having literally a revelation. And in a matrix type of a situation, they see what anybody else would say is an illusion that is in fact reality. They've been living in an illusion, thinking that was reality, when the reality is actually something different. They're taking the red pill. They're saying, I'm not gonna pretend that these people that say they're my leaders, that say that they are interested in the best interest of the country, who are really just mobsters, ripoff artists, and high priests of evil, working and living through this. Washington, D.C. is as much a church to their religion as any church on the planet. You're looking at the channeling of evil through that city. It's the high priest church of evil, if you want to get right down to it. And then the Vatican, the captured operation. What's the audience hall shaped like underneath the Vatican? It's the serpent's head. You go, what? No, because it's a captured operation. In spycraft, the genius of spy masters is to be able to keep a spy network going, but then take one player out and put in one of your own in the place, and then everybody below them thinks that they're getting their information to the right guy. Everybody above them think that they're getting all the information correctly, but this one piece, this one link in the chain has been pulled out and another one put in, or everything below that link is actually going to another chain. You think you're reporting up to the good guys. In reality, that guy's reporting to the bad guys. And because of isolation, because you have to compartmentalize everything, you don't realize that you're actually part of something wrong. America as a captured operation has been working as a captured operation for a very long time. We've been doing the devil's will, if you will, all over the world. And our army destroying, our people out there killing, doing stuff. And it's a very hard thing for warriors to realize that they've actually, their patriotism, their love of country, mom, apple pie, hot rods, has been diverted to somebody else's use. And you wake up and realize that, that's happened, and it's hard to reconcile, because how do you reconcile emotionally, internally, that you haven't done the good that you thought you were doing, even though it was hard? It's you talk about veterans committing suicide and other things, and how many times is it that they've come to some realization that what they thought they were doing for all the right reasons, and where they hardened up and did what they had to do, or were part of it, even if they were remote at some distance, that they still, it didn't satisfy, it wasn't right. They weren't the valiant warrior for good that they wanted to be. And so it can tear them up inside. And that's where we have to come back in and say, nope, look, we were all fooled.
We're going to have to work on that. We're going to have to work on that healing.
Yes.
Prior to your waking up, it was a period of innocence. I said it at the top, though. Once you do have an understanding, once you've come to realize these things, forgive yourself. That's a long lesson. Forgive the people that did the trauma to you, and you don't want to carry around that trauma, and it wasn't your fault. And you have the right to redemption. You can live a good life, but it is so traumatizing. And that's why this window is so important. A lot of those that are in our audience have had years of this realization phase. Our site has presented this information for about 8 years. And it's a duty. That's why it's called Prepare for Change. The change means this revelation of time hiding the occult.
Let me just say it this way. There's an old axiom amongst miners. If a mine collapse happens and guys are able to escape the mine, they understand it's as though they were dead already, and their comrades may be in there, other people that are trapped. If you got out of the mine, first out, first in, you don't act as though you somehow, oh boy, I got mine, too bad about you. You immediately work out the rescue and you go back in, and that's part of the healing. In fact, warriors who've had a hard time, or they come to some revelation like this, part of the therapy is to understand that they're one of many, and then they go back and help their community, their comrades, their friends and relatives. And that's part of the healing process, to be part of the fix. That's this moment in time. That's why we can't be um, um, slow to decide, okay, we're going to go get in here and turn this around. This boomerang moment, this moment of reversals, they're turned our fate around. We're going back and turn it back again. And so when people wake up, the way that you reconcile that is that minor mentality. Okay, I get it. I'm mad as hell that I got tricked, fooled. How do I get this resolved? I get this resolved by helping other people to wake up. And I don't, just bash their brains in to, do what I'm telling you to do and kick them in the ass and everything else. When people are waking up, it takes a little bit to come to it. And that's why even with the book I wrote, I'm trying to walk people through to a certain type of understanding. That's why I'm taking as much time as I am here with you for your audience to kind of think through these things so that you can do the mental gymnastics to come to some kind of a understanding of what's going on, some level of reconciliation with where we're at right now and how we got here. And then what do we do moving forward? And I would say that even with what, not just President Trump, but the men and women behind him who are assisting, he's not one person, he's part of a team. You can't do this by yourself. In fact, I would say to you, all these rallies around the country where people are showing up, they're closing ranks, they're shoulder to shoulder. The expressions of unity, of some sense of common purpose that were done with these lies, that these evils are exposed. We see these would-be emperors without their clothes who want to rule over us, and they can't even rule over their own self, their own life, their own families in a decent way. That they are monsters. And you can't understate that. They're not just misguided.